Welcome into Checkpointxp, your home for esports and gaming. I'm sitting down here with Matt Flame Rodriguez, General Manager of the Houston Outlaws. Flame, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
So, the first thing that I'd like to know here is that home and away matches are imminent for the 2020 season. How excited are you to finally have the players in Houston properly, and what does that mean for the team?
I mean, I'm pretty pumped. I think one thing that's been kind of looming since Overwatch League started has been this concept of home away. Like when Overwatch League was originally pitched, they were saying, oh, we're going to have home games and away games. And everyone was like, that's kind of crazy. And so I think to have it finally coming to fruition in some capacity, even if it is just homestands, is like massive, because I know that selling the geolocation idea was very good for our fans. Like obviously there's a lot of Texas backing behind our team, but we've never actually been able to do live matches for them. So just having that ability to, finally come home and give these people who have been kind of waiting for us for 2.5 years to like something to, come and experience with us is like very, very positive.
Now, coming from LA, Houston obviously is going to be a bit of a change of pace for you. What do you hope to do once you get down there into the Lone Star State? Anything specific that you're looking forward to?
I want to see rodeos because I've never experienced one, but they seem like never, and it looks like such a cool experience, like the whole cowboy vibes and like some old school Western kind of.
I actually grew up in the country, so I've been to quite a few rodeos. If they don't draw blood, if there's no blood anywhere, it wasn't a real rodeo. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
But I think also the food. I think like everyone's super excited about like meat down here. Mm-hmm. Like there's just so much like steak and beef and like that's like a weird positive I think for everybody. But also just like I think quality of life. I mean LA has its perks and its benefits, but there's nothing like something that feels more homey. And I think Texas seems to be like a very welcoming and like warm-ish state that you can finally kind of settle down and feel like you're a part of. Well,
and I feel like the Outlaws have, at least from what I've seen on social media, some of the best fans in the league. So the 2019 season was a little rough for you in the Outlaws, but you've made some amazing acquisitions for the 2020 season in Hydration and Blase, which adds to an already very deep and very talented DPS pool. Can you talk at all about the thinking behind these additions?
So not every roster move, I guess, is done. I guess like that's one of the precedents that I think everyone can kind of infer. It's like, obviously we're probably not trying to field 5 DPS players. Mm-hmm. I think Hydration's kind of misleading as a pickup because he's actually very good at main tank and off tank right now. Okay. And he actually had a lot of offers in the main tank position. I'm not going to say that I picked him up as a main tank. Obviously, Moon is very competent and probably going to be our starter this year. But from that perspective, Hydration brings a lot of roster depth that I don't think people particularly, fully grasp, like just how flexible and valuable he is just from if one player gets sick, even if it's your main support. I mean, he has a Lucio background too, and he played that on stage last year, and he's won on Lucio. So it's just having like a player like him that is like a one-size-fits-all kind of shoe that anyone can wear, and like if someone's out for the day, you just put Hydration in.
Yeah, no, that's a great foresight. We heard a lot from the casters and the analysts, as we were going into the postseason, that home and away next year with all the travel is going to take a new type of toll on those who are used to just staying in Los Angeles. So it's going to be really important to be able to have those sort of backup positions, to be able to sub in when and where you need it to be.
No, I mean, I think one of the challenges that someone brought up yesterday in our like team, internal chat was like, you're going from this humid, hot southern state. A lot of our competitors are in the Northeast. And so like traveling in February from Houston to Boston is like you're going from,
good luck.
You're going from like this kind of beachy weather, high humidity to blizzards. And suddenly like how is that going to affect players on a weekly basis? Mm-hmm. And like how do you prevent that? How do you stop, people from getting sick? And I think that's like a weird thing that we're going to have to think about. I think every team's going to have to think about it. But us especially going back and forth from very different climates every week will take its toll on people's health. So having, roster depth obviously is good in that perspective. And I mean, like Blase played Brig last season. He played Diva last season. He's a DPS main at heart, I think. But again, it's more just like having more flexibility options, I think, for next year, because I think the differentiation in Overwatch is weird where you like say this player's an off tank player only, or this player's a support player only. Like, for example, Raucus played Widowmaker for us in season 1, and like he's really good at Widowmaker, but he's our main support or our flex support. So
I used to love seeing him flex onto Soldier when you guys attacked Numbani. Those were the greatest things to see.
Yeah, so I think that this year is like the first year where you're starting to see players maybe find their roles. Like I don't think every player that came into Overwatch League as a support was a support at heart, if that makes sense.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think when you look back to the first season, a lot of the emphasis and the sort of star power were put on these specialists. Sabi will be on the Tracer, for example, and there was the whole thing about, oh, well, Jake's not a Tracer specialist, so what's he really doing? But now you're starting to see that those who can play across multiple roles are the ones who are really starting to be the stars. When Brig came in and destroyed the dive meta, what happened to Sabi?
Yeah, and you like a player like Blase was known for his like Doomfist, his like Genji, like these niche DPS heroes, but like when Brig came out, he just became one of the best Brigidas at the time. And like I think flexibility is going to become bigger, especially as like you look forward towards Overwatch 2, you look towards new updates. Like a hero like Baptiste is fundamentally completely different than Lucio, but the same player theoretically should be playing it. But the hero is like, it has a pulse rifle at the end of the day. It doesn't have like this AoE kind of booping gun. So it's like you need players that are ready to get on different roles. And I think given the uncertainty of the league and also the uncertainty of how the game is going to shape out throughout the next year, I don't think we'll be on double shield forever. But if we are having, the options of these players that are DPS players, but maybe they're suited for some new support that's coming out or some new off tank that's coming out. Hydration's like really good at Sigma right now. So like there's a lot of that going on. I think that the differentiation or the specific role identities of people or players in the league is going to go away, I think, by the end of this year.
It's interesting now. You've also picked up Harsha Bandy, former assistant coach for the Vancouver Titans, and he also just helped Team USA bring home the World Cup gold medal. Is a very, very big boon for the team, and he's also originally from Houston. Kind of seems like a match made in heaven. What are you hoping that he brings to the team?
Leadership, I guess, at the heart, dedication. I've never worked with him on like a coaching perspective, but I've seen him pump out content. Like back when I was making content, he was making content, and he seems like he knows his way around the space, and he's also very likable. The players respect him, and I think that's like a very big, important piece of like what your head coach needs to be. I think a lot of teams this season will struggle in that regard because there is a lot of overturn on coaching this year.
Yes, there is.
And a lot of teams have lost their head coaches. A lot of teams have lost assistant coaches. A lot of teams don't even have general managers right now, or didn't. So when you bring in someone new into a leadership position, the players have to buy in. And if you don't have that buy-in instantly, it gets very difficult to manage, I think, as the season goes on. So the player, like I asked the players, at the end of the day when we let go of Tyrong, it was like, what do you guys think? Where's everyone's heads at? And like players gave me like lists, let's look at this guy, let's look at this guy, I heard good things about this guy. But Harsha was like this unanimous yes, I guess, from all of them. And so they're kind of bought into his ideals and his system and, where he wants to go with the team. And like, I've spoken to him a million times. I trust him really like a lot. So it was kind of a match made in heaven, but it was also, I think he was excited to come home. He's excited to work with more, USA-based players, maybe some Koreans in the future, but it just worked out. It was just perfect.
Now, there are 13 teams that are located in North America, but the Outlaws are the only team made almost entirely of North American talent. Is that just a coincidence, or do you find that there's an advantage to having only one region represented on your roster?
There's inherent advantages. There's also inherent disadvantages. I think over the past 2 years, I've learned both sides of the coin. I don't think we'll stay fully North American this year. I do expect to pick up Korean talent like going forward. It's just not, you need players that fit the bill, right? Some players you can't just force into the role. You can't just say, oh, we're going to add Koreans to this North American team. You need like a Korean player that's like, I am ready to join a North American team. I'm like up for that challenge. I want this. And that's rare. It's also same with like coaching. It's like you can't just like, I think we learned last year, you can't just force language barriers to go away. Tyrong worked super hard, but at the end of the day, there were definitely some communication, mishaps or just hard things to explain between the players and the coach, and emotions that weren't fully, expressed correctly, maybe just because of language barriers. And so when you create those obstacles, or when you acknowledge that those obstacles exist, everyone needs to be aware of them, and everyone needs to be ready to tackle them, and in the mindset that they are problems and we're not just going to ignore them. And so I think like the North American aspect of the team, like having the comms all in English, is like beneficial. But even when we play with Arhan, the players simplifying their comms is actually very, very beneficial, like for everybody. Instead of having these long drawn out conversations during your like engagements, you're just saying things like, focus the brig. I have something very simple. and Arhan would do the same thing. And like that does actually enhance communication in some capacity because now everyone can talk and all their thoughts are simpler and everything is like more terse. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say going forward it'll be the North American team. I mean, we have a lot of Europeans. We have now Hydration, who represents Brazil in some capacity, and then Laze is actually, I think, Chinese American. So I mean, we're bringing in more and more, you know, different ethnicities. But I definitely think going forward we won't necessarily be the North American team. Although I think from a branding perspective, it's worked out in our favor, just from, you know, giving people someone to cheer for. But I never want to turn it into like anyone thinking that a Korean player is like being tossed aside or something.
All right, so final question here. The rivalry between the Outlaws and the Fuel is probably one of the most intense in the entire league. In what ways do you think the home and away format is going to affect that rivalry now?
Well, so we're actually split, and we kind of got the good end of the stick. So they're considered west, we're considered east, and like the line of which side of the country you're on is actually right through the middle of Texas. So for us to be able to stay on the East Coast and not have to worry about flights to, you know, Shanghai and Korea is actually pretty nice. But the home away definitely brought a new feel last year to the homestand in Dallas. I'm a little upset that this year our match is actually in Dallas again against them.
And you only play them once the entire year.
I know, it's like the format kind of screws over the rivalry. And then the rivalry is not really able to grow because we're only playing once a year. So then it's like, you know, how much stake do you put in it? But I mean, from a fan perspective, it's fun. And I think that there's a lot more opportunity this year, obviously, to do local market stuff, maybe like a show match in the off season with Fuel. But it's nice. It's different, I think, between like the LA teams, for example, because they're, you know, Los Angeles versus Los Angeles. It's like the Mets versus the Yankees. The rivalry's there, but it's more just like which side you're kind of on. It's like it's subjective. You can pick. You could be a Mets fan, just be a Yankees fan the next day, right? But I think there's a lot more. I'm learning now that there's a lot more Texas pride in each of the different regions, and like they have the saying that Texas loves Texas, which I've felt instantly the second you go down there. Everything's like Texas themed. There's like, I remember I was at like a HEB supermarket and there was a Texas shaped like pancake cutter, and I was like, this is so weird, like cookie cutters shaped in Texas, and like it's interesting, but you can tell that the regions between like Dallas and Houston are like competitive. So there's already like this inner city pride, I guess, similar to like a Boston versus New York mindset. So it brings a lot of hype, and like even like last year's homestand, like I was saying, it was like a split audience. Like there were a lot of Outlaws fans at the Dallas homestand, but being able to like play off that and feel that energy, and it's like raw, like real energy that you can't really get at Blizzard Arena in Los Angeles, is something I think everyone should be looking forward to this year. And I mean, Dallas versus Outlaws will be its own thing, but I think we'll see it a lot more across the rest of the league, whether it's New York versus Boston or whether it's maybe San Francisco versus LA, on like a scale that I don't think people fully understand outside of maybe us and Fuel after like living through it at that homestand.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest has been Matt Flame Rodriguez, General Manager of the Houston Outlaws. Flame, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.